Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Roberto Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the GFCC. The GFCC is a global multi-stakeholder organization combining our members and fellows. We have a footprint in 30 countries. Today, we are here for our 8th online conversation, Now, Bridge, and Reboot. The theme for this conversation is global partnerships or global innovation coalitions, and I will explain that to you in a minute. In order to get started, I wanted to do 3 things here. First, comment what this conversation series is about. Second, to introduce you this session and our speakers. And third, talk about logistics and how we are running the session today. So first about Now, Bridge, and Reboot. We are all facing around the globe the COVID crisis, but we are also thinking on how we could maybe turn this into an opportunity to reboot the economy and society. But in order to do that, we need to bridge 2 different stages, the now with the future. This is what this conversation series is about. Today, we have a great group of speakers here to talk about global innovation coalitions. As I said, the context or the backdrop for this whole conversation is provided by the current global situation. And since the beginning of May, we have been having conversations with leaders from within the GFCC network and outside. And I think 3 key ideas emerged from those conversations. The first is that this crisis is an accelerator. It has been accelerating existing trends. Second, it's a highlighter, especially of some of the weaknesses that we have in societies, business systems, and economies around the globe. And finally, there is a set of underlying social aspects that are really at the bottom of this whole situation. Things related to trust, to social norms, to values, and how we really connect all those dots in the crisis context. We had 8 sessions. We started in May. We talked about bridging the future and the present situation. Then we talk about a response to the crisis, how to turn knowledge into impact. And then we have 2 sessions having a look at different realities around the globe, Asia and Europe in particular. We talked innovation, a key aspect to respond, but also to build the future. And we talked digitalization. This is one of the key things that has been accelerated. Today, we're talking about partnerships. This is a systemic crisis. It requires systemic interventions and actions. And we believe that it's also necessary to engage a variety of stakeholders across society to build a different and a better economy and society. Some of the key ideas that emerged over this series of conversations are that we can turn this into an opportunity. In order to do that, we need to have a design mindset. There are some models that are already emerging in business, in society, and governance. The importance of local realities in cities was highlighted. Resiliency, it's a key feature to be addressed going forward. We need a type of response, a network response, engaging different players and different actors in society. In terms of the response to the crisis itself, there are some very important factors: earliness, trust, governance. Also, aspects related to leadership and how messages are communicated to society. Thinking about innovation and what's next, or the next economy, as our colleagues in the US Council on Competitiveness are working, there are some verticals or opportunity areas that were highlighted, from health to fintech, from education to sustainable infrastructures. We'll see a process, it's not 0 or 1, probably we're seeing it's a transition or an accommodation process. One key aspect will be how we allocate resources on the past solutions, past models, or to build future solutions and future models. In our last conversation, we talked aspects related to inclusiveness, and if we think of digitalization, how we can provide some of the infrastructures, the skills, and the capabilities that are needed across the globe, how to protect freedom and democracy, and how to think strategically in terms of priorities, investment, data, and governance. So we talked about a variety of opportunity areas for action. health, sustainable energies, infrastructures, education, finance, sanitation, mobility, media, governance, and others. And we also reviewed a set of important ideas, this notion that we can really adopt a design mindset to where there's some of those things: leadership, sustainability, scalability, inclusiveness, and the engagement of different stakeholders. We're here today with a group of builders. And the model of this conversation, or the notion, is what are some, in relation to areas and potential focuses that we could have, what are some of the priorities that we should consider going forward to build a better, more sustainable economy and society? And also, how could we do that? Engaging different stakeholders across society. Two assumptions that we have for the conversation: this is a systemic crisis. It requires systemic solutions, but also it requires partnerships, alliances, and coalitions. Having said that, let me briefly introduce our speakers today, and I'll turn to you, starting with my boss, Deborah Wynn-Smith. Deborah is the president and CEO of the U.S. Council on Competitiveness. She's the president of the GFCC. She had an amazing career overseeing a variety of things related to technology strategy and innovation policy in the United States. Was the first assistant secretary for technology policy in the Commerce Department. We have our chairman in the GFCC, Chad Holliday. Chad is a global business leader. He used to be the chairman and CEO of DuPont. He served as chairman of Bank of America. He's now the chairman of the board of Royal Dutch Shell, and over the years has played a series of roles in building global partnerships, including and leading the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All coalition. We have from Canada, our friend and colleague, Laurie Schmidt. Laurie is the president of L'Oreal Management Group, a consultancy company. She's the former CEO of Goal Productivity Canada. I think that to a great extent, one organization that she really spearheaded and built the connections all over Canada. She worked in the public sector. She's active also in the nonprofit world. She was recently nominated one of the 50 Canadians over 50. Great to have you here, Laurie, and thanks for joining so early in the morning. Joining us from Lisbon, Portugal, we have Miriam Taylor. Miriam is a social activist entrepreneur. She's the founder, the co-founder and CEO of Mushima Bio, which is really leveraging the potential of new protein sources and aquatic organisms to provide feedstock to cosmetics, pharma, and other industries. And she, one of the first spin-offs of that, it's a natural-based line of hair products. She's a TV host. I know that you were filming yesterday night, Miriam, so thanks for being with us today. From Okinawa, Japan, we have Professor Peter Gress. He's the president and CEO of the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. Professor Gress comes with an incredible background in research and research leadership in areas that are very important for this conversation: health sciences, genetics, and so on and so forth. He served as president of the Max Planck Society in Germany. He was a professor of different universities. He was a visiting scientist of the NIH, and he's a member of several organizations and boards, and including he currently is the chairman of the Siemens Technology and Innovation Council, and he was a member of the Innovation Dialogue led by Chancellor Angela Merkel. Professor Gress, great to have you here. And from Florida, we have our friend, colleague, and GFCC member, Bill Bonnet. Bill is the chair of the advisory board of the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and he has a variety of roles, including being part of the executive committee of the U.S. Council. He was a board member for several organizations, nonprofit organizations working in Africa in sustainable energy and also other topics. He has an investment company, Whitecap Investments. And Bill was one of the founders and founding investors in the early days of the Internet of GeoCities, together with his brother, one of the first really big IPOs of the time, a company that was later sold to Yahoo. So thank you so much for being here today. The logistics for this conversation, if you're joining us for the first time, is please use the chat feature to submit questions. We're going for a first round of remarks. We're hearing from our group of speakers and leaders coming from across the globe. And then we will engage in a conversation. I will curate the questions and pull the questions that you in attendance will be submitting here. In order to get it started, I want to turn to you, Deborah, for your initial remarks, and then Laurie, as it's early in the morning, I'll give you the priority to go next. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you, Roberto. And let me just say what a delight and pleasure it is to see our GFCC colleagues and friends from around the world, and meet you, Miriam, as well. Thank you for joining us. And thank you very much, Chad Holliday, our chairman of the GFCC, for being with us for this final concluding conversation, as well as for the launch when we did this. It seems some weeks ago, but we've made a tremendous amount of progress in learning and understanding and sharing what's going on in our respective nations and what's going on really in regions around the world. Yes, to deal with the pandemic and how we can optimize our responses for health and security and safety of our citizens, but very importantly, understanding what are the great potentials to rebuild the future, redesign the future in a way that can bring sustainable, inclusive growth and prosperity. And Roberto, let me congratulate you for your tremendous leadership in designing and managing these conversations and really bringing such an incredible group of leaders from around the world to participate. And I know that while you want to take a break, we in the GFCC think that this is a tremendous new model of collaboration, and it really is at the heart of our mission. I'll just make a few points, and that is that these challenges that we've been discussing and that we're all dealing with, obviously in responding to the health dimensions of the pandemic and the global search and rapidity of the search for a vaccine, as well as looking at the power of digitization, its acceleration, and how it's enabled telework, remote learning, our conversations, everything that enables us to continue to function and operate in all dimensions during this time, but also recognizing some of the vulnerabilities and cybersecurity attacks and things which have accelerated during this time. Also seeing the weakness and lack of resiliency in global supply chains, particularly in the area of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and what this meant for the national and regional response to the pandemic, but also issues around energy supply, energy prices, sustainability, the movement to a low carbon world. All these things have emerged in our conversation as, yes, huge challenges, but major, major opportunities for innovation and collaboration. And that's what the GFCC is all about. So I know we're going to have a very rich discussion today about public-private partnerships, about how to commercialize many of the emerging innovations at scale. What are the types of partnerships we can envision across all these platforms, including what's the role of philanthropy, and very importantly, new designs, new models for collaboration so that we can bring in more participants, more innovators, more ideas as we design a future. I would like to just make a point that one of the challenges that we've seen in the United States and perhaps more in the Western world than in Asia has been the real weaknesses in our systems for how we care and treat our elderly. And I think we're going to see huge innovation in that area of the healthcare system delivery, as well as the social implications of that. That's just one I'd like to highlight. Also, of course, we're seeing huge innovation and change in higher education. And I know Peter will talk about this, but this is another huge opportunity for the GFCC, given our University 4.0 initiative that is underway. And finally, the incredible importance of ensuring we have universal electrification and access to broadband internet technologies that enable learning, telework, and all the things for a functioning world going forward. So with that, let me turn it back to you, Roberto. I know we're going to have an opportunity for actually proposing some large-scale partnerships. I'll just conclude by saying every year the GFCC issues a statement of principles on what drives productivity, inclusive growth, and we have aligned these with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so we've really, in a way, been ahead of the curve at looking at some of these intersections of development, social equity, racial inclusion, all the issues that have also come out during this pandemic that we need to address at scale. So coming back to our conversation, how we also accelerate partnerships that align with our mission, our priorities, but also advancing sustainable development goals will be very important. Thank you, Roberto, for your leadership.
Thank you, Deborah. Very kind. Laurie, over to you. You are a builder. You build partnerships. You scaled up goal productivity. You spun it off, and you scale that up. What are the opportunities to build new things and scale new partnerships in the globe that you see as priority today?
Great. Well, thank you, Roberto, and hello, everyone. And thank you so much for your leadership in this incredible series. I just want to say that as it's the last one for now. Thank you for your leadership, Deborah and Chad Holiday and Roberto and your team. And it's really an honor to give you some thoughts today and share along with such a distinguished panel. I think what I wanted to do, I found this amazing headline and I read it a couple of weeks ago that said, "Adapting in Crisis puts a lens on partnerships." And I thought as I kick things off, I wanted to share a little bit around some of the new global partnerships that have kicked off almost overnight and have emerged and formed in those critical areas of health, education, the economy, and social well-being during this time. Because there's a lot that we can learn from the elements of those and a few others that are now gaining strength that will help us look at what we can do going forward. Now, on the health side, Canada partnered very quickly with domestic and international organizations to assemble leading researchers and life science companies around coronavirus research and the development of medical countermeasures, accelerate vaccine development as we're all working on, coordinate a COVID-19 viral and genome host sequencing effort, some traceability apps. Canada helped provide COVID-19 diagnostic support to more than 20 partner countries and used data analytics to identify potential drug and medical device protective product shortages and navigated supply chains to address those needs. And the investments in national and global partnership efforts were substantial, like beyond anything that we'd really seen. On the education front, and I know that we'll hear about more of that later, but if I skim past, we've seen research papers being published daily and international reviewers working at incredible speed to analyze all the information that's coming out. And I know there's probably a whole entire conversation around that one alone. But it's been said that we have seen more international educational collaborations within the last 4 months than the last 4 years. And we've seen educational institutions have to move into digital delivery and partnerships of all kinds through this shift. And so a lot of these have just made us have to find new partners, build trust quickly. We're seeing significant economic partnerships through supply chain disruptions, as Deborah mentioned, new collaborative supply chain behavior to get goods and services to the regions of need. And very quickly, government partnered with a range of businesses and supporting agencies to provide a new range of collaborative business supports, access to capital, digital pivot supports, remote work, safety, security. So it's about building on these collaborative partnerships that are going to move us forward. Health, society, education, the economy. That's going to help us realize that new sustainable future. And it's our why. But the how needs to come next. And just really quickly, I wanted to summarize a few. I did a quick review and I came up with about 100 new innovative collaboration models that have emerged in just the last few months. And so one really quick, at a Canadian university, they've developed and built a tool, a platform designed to evaluate international partnerships, top priority partners in each country, rapidly develop strategic partnerships around key priority areas. They've connected over 400 active education and research agreements in 55 plus countries over the past year. And I think GFCC has been doing a lot of this already. I think there's just an opportunity to move it to the next level. You know, within social enterprises, we've collaborated to address food and health and shelter and crucial supports and new digital platforms, and how do we reach digital to those regions of need and meet demands in a more efficient and timely manner. And you know, everything from community to urban centers to regional to national and to global levels, you know, our ability to care in new and innovative ways has been astounding, even though this has been such a tough time. And the one that I was really thinking of for Miriam this morning is She Innovates. She Innovates Alberta is the first chapter in Canada, and it's part of the UN Women's Innovation Strategy to drive action. UN Women has created a global innovation coalition for change, a partnership between women and key representatives from the private sector, academia, nonprofits, focusing on developing innovation markets to work better for women and accelerate the achievement of, you know, gender equality and women's empowering. So I just wanted to say that as my time goes quickly by, how fascinating, Deborah, Chad, who's on the call, Roberto, that the GFC Global Innovation Summit in Kazakhstan last fall was themed around the imperative of global transformation, business transformation, digital transformation, and here we are. It's here. In a few months, we've had to adapt and adjust very quickly to those range of new platforms and new partnerships. You were out ahead of the curve. So moving forward, I think we don't want to get stuck in this time. We want to evaluate where we are and now move forward with purpose. And it's about how we choose to move. I think the elements are here. We've been hearing about them for a few weeks. So how do we build this platform and continue to build impactful partnerships that are imperative around collaborative innovation? Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. We'll be back to several of the topics. I just want to leave one question with you. You listed several partnerships that are already there and that emerged recently. What did you miss? What's the one partnership, or what is the one thing that you think that's missing in that context? But I'll leave that for later. Peter, over to you in Okinawa. You are a leading scientist in an area that is very into this pandemic, and scientists work globally and in partnerships, and you also lead an innovative research and higher education institution. So what are your thoughts on some of the topics, action areas, and also about this conversation about new innovation partnerships? Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Roberto. Thank you and Chad and Deborah. It's a great honor of being part of that marvelous event. And I very much am looking forward to entering a discussion and give you some of the insight that we have from the science point of view. Let me begin by a statement that I took from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said that the COVID-19 crisis is not only a health crisis, but a job crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and a development crisis. This pandemic shows that we are all at risk. So a planet filled with inequalities of different sorts, has been confronted by a great equalizer. And the COVID-19 is not only damaging human health, and it also damages economic prosperity wherever it spreads, taking no account of a country's size, its wealth, its history. Politics, well, that can be debated, of course, depending on who is leading the country, culture or genetics. But the scientists have been able to lay open what can be done in a crisis of an unprecedented magnitude. The scope and speed which the scientists have responded is absolutely marvelous. We had to mobilize at speed to understand the virus, the nature of the virus, to share the treatment modalities, to work to develop therapies, support companies and protect the employment structure, and do everything possible to keep economies afloat. So currently, I also am already predicting that there will be an all-time record that will be broken in developing a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, which the world is developing is demanding in record time. But despite all of this, there have been weaknesses that have been exposed and negative sides of the globalization laid open in this particular crisis. Supply chain, I think Deborah already alluded to this, concentrated or spanning continents are vulnerable. Items essential to human health and well-being dependent on these distribution networks. Some societies were at serious risk of running low or running out, funny enough, even out of toilet paper. A planet filled. It's apparent that the global new normal will be driven by a nation's need to become more resilient. And how can we build resilience into our healthcare system, industries, educational systems, and economy? Now, some of the efforts have not been appealing. Nationalistic politics and practices have developed alongside outright hoarding. We have seen an economic decoupling and the introduction of disincentives for offshore manufacturing. And this has been happening despite the prospect of higher consumer prices. I have a few quotes from French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron. He pledged to make strategically important products in France. He observed that this crisis has taught us that for certain goods, certain products, certain materials, their strategic character requires that we have European sovereignty. The former US Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers has predicted that economic strategy will need to put less emphasis on short-term commercial advantage and pay more attention to strategic advantages in the long run. Japan, meanwhile, the country I'm living, launched a $2 billion fund to help Japanese companies shift production out of China. So COVID-19 has made our world understandably nervous about complete dependence and dominant providers. United States, for example, hoards the entire global supply of a drug currently licensed to treat COVID-19 infection and its consequences. Remdesivir, which is a drug that can attack the viral polymerase very specifically. China's tight grip on the rollout of 5G technology is being questioned with ever-increasing alarm in the wake of this pandemic. There is a now darkening US regulatory environment, reinforcing the prospect of fragmentation along national lines in our development of global digital technologies. With the prospect of country-first global new order, is there a place for global innovation coalition? So I have outlined what is currently happening that is arguing against. But I like to think it's more than ever. We have a need more than ever to cooperate. There is no doubt that without cooperation, innovations, indeed, most of public life will come to a standstill. No single entity acting alone can bring innovations required to society to address the challenges of the future. The necessary touch points are myriad and interconnected, and these are the interfaces that we have to generate, hopefully, in our discussion. It's university, governments, corporations, startups, venture capital, customer like lawyers, marketers, accountants, programmers, and so forth and so on. So our future depends on productive alliances, particularly in the light of the renationalization attempts. We have to do the utmost to lay open the benefits of global alliances. And I'm very happy in our question and answer session to give you my thoughts as to what areas I find of particular value. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. This is great. Bill, I want to turn to you because I know that there are some ideas on areas and priorities, things in which you have been working on. So thanks for joining, Bill.
Thanks, Roberto. Thanks, Deborah, Chad. I'd like to focus on sustainability and start with an Al Gore quote, which was in the Journal the other day. COVID-19, with all its unfolding tragedy, presents a once-in-a-century obligation to rethink the relationships among business, markets, government, and society. What is desperately needed and what we must deliver is a sustainable form of capitalism. So on sustainability, I'm going to focus on just three ideas. Roberto, you and I have explored it a little bit, where our unique strengths and relative advantages might enable us to form partnerships that we otherwise couldn't. First would be the decoder, which the GFCC has and which is not currently active. But to me, it points the way for thinking about how we might insert ourselves into the sustainability metrics business. And what do I mean by that? Picking up on Peter's thoughts and amplifying them a little bit, what this COVID crisis has meant for me and for sustainability, I think, is the primacy of metrics, of science-based communication that has reached a global audience. There's been inevitable political pushback, et cetera, but we have the whole world talking about the same set of variables, the same set of success or failure, the same set of numbers, frankly, in a way that the globe has never seen before, perhaps other than wartime. So if you take that as an opportunity, that a metrics-based communication on sustainability can get wider currency than it has before, I think we can insert ourselves in that dialogue. For example, we could have a much wider global communications capability on a broader and sustained scale on CO2 targets, on Paris Accord progress, on decoupling of CO2 emissions growth from global GDP growth. So a metrics-based communication strategy where we can use our global network to advance the notion that the globe is ready for a much wider and deeper engagement with the metrics of sustainability. So that would be point number one. Point number two, and Deborah, you'll get a kick out of this. I thought one of the most impactful things that the council has done in the last 10 years that I've been involved is Ollie. And you'll remember that should bring a smile to your face. So back in 2016, Deborah cooked up a real world powerhouse demonstration of urban mobility trends, and combined with what we represent on the council as a tech innovator and thought leader, and literally driving out in front of us was this 3D printed electric powered minivan called Ollie from a company called Local Motors, which is very much in the forefront of the urban mobility trend. And it occurs to me that played then and it plays now to some of the real strengths of the council in terms of what we've always highlighted as innovation drivers of growth. We haven't exploited that. We haven't used that on the GFCC. So Ollie provides, and Deborah, Roberto, you might want to send around something on Ollie, which I think is very cool to this day. So how can we use that kind of powerful demonstration of innovation on urban mobility? That's an obvious case. We have 30 countries, we have leaders from around the world. we could be more of a exemplar for urban mobility trends in a way that I think could be impactful and doable, frankly. And third would be, I saw something the other day on New Zealand, and there was an article saying New Zealand is doing a, what do they call it? A building for climate change program at the national level, building efficiency, building and construction, amounts to as much as 40% of indirectly or directly global CO2 emissions. It's a relatively speaking overlooked sector in terms of efficiencies, in terms of sustainability, in terms of the kind of progress we need to see. Here we have a country that has done beautifully on COVID. We have a Jim Metzen, who's a very active member of ours. Occurs to me that we might, that might be a very productive partnership for us to think about. Again, it's a commonality of all of our members that they have a built infrastructure that's in a sense underperforming with respect to sustainability. So that might be one where we could carve out a leadership niche and partner with, there are various UN groups, there, the Green Building Council, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any number of partnerships you could envision in that space. And I think those three, I tried to pick out the ones that where I thought we might have a comparative advantage. And those are three that occurred to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for bringing this to the conversation, this whole notion that we need to act at different levels and leverage the network that we have. In the one hand, as you said, leveraging or focusing on metrics and communicating more to the policy thinking framework, but also leveraging concrete examples of solutions that are being deployed and using our network. So thanks for that. I think, Miriam, you come with an amazing background of a connector. So you have a company that's working with scientists, but you are a gender, race, social activist, also working with communities and empowering women. How can we bring this social perspective to this conversation about the future of economy and society? And thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this amazing conversation, and so much needed. First of all, congratulations for this brilliant initiative. Well done. So to go back to your question, I think that we should start thinking or reminding ourselves about the general law of relativity that Einstein has told us 101 years ago. Because what the general law of relativity says is that time, space, and matter are interconnected. So we are all interconnected, in fact. And if time and space and matter are interconnected, this means that we are still suffering the repercussions of past decisions. And going into that matter, we need to address the fact that the Africans have been dehumanized. And they have, during slavery, and with the hierarchization of humans, the Africans were disregarded as humans. So we have been put at the base, and a whole narrative has been ever since constructed and built since then. A narrative of propaganda that has created a collective imaginary or fed into this collective imaginary of people that were not even people, were not even humans. So we cannot talk about sustainability or climate change even, because everything, it's all interconnected, without addressing what needs to actually be addressed. We live in a very, very unbalanced world, so much so that the Africans are still today at the base of any structure, are the people that have less access to education, to justice, to healthcare, so much so that we are probably the communities in the diaspora that are suffering the most with the impact of this current pandemic. So I would really like to bring into this conversation the reminder of the theory of the general theory of relativity, and go from here. And I'll be keen to discuss with my panel colleagues about these views, and how is your perception of the whole without without bringing into the equation all the people, all the ones that have no access to this space where we are now.
Thank you, Miriam. I think this is something that we talked in the sense of that there are lots of asymmetries around the globe, right? And you highlighted one of the major asymmetries that you have. And one question that I leave here, we can address that in a minute, is what are maybe some of the solutions that we could have as society to address that when we think about building the new economy? Yeah, but we'll be back to that in a minute. So thanks for sharing. Chad, I would like to turn to you and say you were in the beginning of this conversation series, and I said you lead a variety of initiatives around the globe, including, as I mentioned, the UN Sustainable Energy for All initiative and several others. What are some of the opportunities that you see, and maybe some of the partnerships that maybe are missing that come to your mind?
Roberto, thanks very much. It's great to be a part of this session, and thank you for your leadership in setting this up. I think it's very timely and very appropriate, and I can't wait to see what you're going to come up with next to take us to the next level. Let me just make an observation. I believe we can all relate to this. We can handle good news, we can handle bad news. Uncertainty is really difficult, and the reality of this COVID-19 situation is still uncertain. We don't know if we're just starting it, almost through, see light at the end of the tunnel. It's just so many unknowns right now. And where we would like to have it over tomorrow, it's probably not likely. And this, I won't even speculate as to what it means. But I think from that, and from all the work we've done at the council, there are three things that come out to me we should be doing as individuals or organizations at this point in time. And they've been really reflected by all the previous speakers, I believe. The first is resilience. We have to figure out what does it mean to be resilient with this unknown, with this disease, with the changes that will undoubtedly come. Many of them positive, many of them maybe not positive. And we have to think about resilience as an individual, or our individual organizations we might be a part of, the cities we live in, the countries we live in. And think about that broadly. And what are those, because my guess is investment in resilience right now will pay off. I think second, and the council reflects this quite well, we need to think about what are the relationships we need to build. Relationships between individual to individual, and organization to organization. My guess is there will be new relationships that have to be built. This very call right now is an example of that. Relationships are being built today during this time we didn't have before. And I think we need to continue doing that because we'll need that for strength as we go forward. And third, and it's been pointed out a couple times this morning already, speed and our definition of speed in this point in time. To think that a disease that probably didn't exist 12 months ago, certainly didn't have a name, certainly didn't have the focus of the world, suddenly has 17 vaccines in trial, hundreds of more backed up behind that, over 300 therapies in trial. The speed that the world has come to potentially deal with this issue is just phenomenal. And to say it was totally organized on a global basis, I think would be far an overstatement. But something about knowing the target and moving fast. So I think every one of us need to accept the fact the speed that was acceptable 12 months ago to deal with problems will not be acceptable today. We must move much faster. So just really point out, we got to be resilient. We got to build new relationships that will be critical in this time. And somehow we got to go much faster than we have before. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Chad. So I'll be very quick in transitioning to Deborah here. It's about the speed. Deborah, your reflections and comments on what we just heard, if you want to react.
Thank you, Roberto. I just wanted to build quickly on Chad Holliday's comments on resiliency, because this is an area for great collaboration and impact for the GFCC. Some of you know that a number of years ago, and Chad Holliday actually led this when he was CEO of DuPont with the president then of Carnegie Mellon University. We did a major study on enterprise resiliency that came out around 2008 that was very much ahead of the curve in terms of thought leadership. People did not even use the language and construct of resiliency. Everything was focused around risk and risk mitigation. Resiliency is a whole different concept. It's really enables an individual, an organization, a country to be able to respond, adapt, and move forward in whatever challenge they are facing. And it is an end state, but it's very dynamic. And based on what's happened in the world with COVID, we have taken that core foundation and completely not just updated it, but redesigned the concept of resiliency across all dimensions of society, business, organizations, and including political worlds as well. And so we're going to be releasing that in the United States in July, later this month. And this is a piece of work that I think the GFCC in our partnerships could build on. Peter talked about it. We've all talked about resiliency. So it's really, really at the top of the list of what we need to do in partnerships, because we're going to have, this pandemic is not the only one. We have to be able to have societies and economies that can function and do what they're supposed to do as we navigate whatever change is going to impact us, as well as build and design these new futures. So I think, that issue is really one at the top of the list. The other thing I'll just quickly share is that the issue of equity and social justice and racial equity that's become really centerfold, as it should in the United States during this pandemic, is something that we all need to build into our activities. And I'll just use the United States as an example. We could say that a third of our population is really totally not participating in our economy, in our society as innovators as they should. This is really unacceptable at any time in history, but very much now. So all of us need to really focus on how we can do some very concrete things to change that. And I think that universities in the United States are going to be at the forefront of that, but also we have to redesign our school system, K through 12, all of these things to address that, because it is not acceptable moving forward with all the challenges we have not to include all people in our country and other countries as innovators, because innovation is really at the core, again, of the GFCC. So I wanted to highlight that. And also talk about the power of individuals to change and do things, and we've heard this through everybody's presentations. Individual scientists reached out in their networks. They formed coalitions. It was really almost a self-organizing neural network of collaboration that has been unleashed. And that is something, again, that we very much want to build on, and do so with the concept of shared values. And I do think the shared value issue, we heard it in our initial conversation from our GFCC distinguished fellow, Kanda Yemkela, you know, the openness, transparency, and trust. These are things that as human beings, if we don't have, we can't do anything. And so building that in as a core for collaboration is very important. And those who don't participate in that world of shared values and trust and transparency and verification really cannot be brought into these networks of collaboration, because without the trust, we can't move forward. So those are just a few overarching comments I wanted to make. But I think in the next series of conversations, Roberto, when we start up again, I would very much recommend that we have an overarching theme of resiliency and also partnerships. And again, the comment of speed, because that really gives us a great framework to build these partnerships in the work of the GFCC to contribute to our future.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. And if you have any questions, please share that with us. Use the Q&A feature here. We already got some questions, and I will review those in a minute. But maybe I could turn back to you, Laurie, and maybe Peter. For you, Laurie, maybe to highlight some of the missing pieces that you are seeing in terms of partnerships and alliances. And Peter, as you said, some of the, let's say, the core focus areas that we could have or should have as society. Laurie, would you go first?
Sure. Well, I think I'll start saying that the key area that's missing, I think, is that global convener. And I really appreciated Peter's comments around that area. There is a proliferation of partners, startups. There's a million of them. I think the challenge is that there's an opportunity for building impact through strengthening those ecosystems to tackle one or more of these big systemic challenges through that collective impact model is really the way to build through on a number of the things that we've talked about, that, compelling time-sensitive vision, using resiliency. We're going to have to continue to focus on a number of the areas that we've highlighted this morning. How these are not going away in the short term, and so things have started to occur, but from an overarching impact perspective, how do we continue to build on those? So the health challenges and health crisis around the globe, and then applying more new technologies and telehealth and the collaborative research going forward. Education, the workforce of the future we've been talking about. Wow, we're in another future already. So how do we, create that more agile education, rapid change that's coming at us? Economic recovery and transitions. Recovery can now mean transitions of traditional economic drivers and new value creation. And, this harkens back to an earlier comment then around new measures of value. How are we even, how are we starting to measure that new knowledge economy in better ways? We've started, but here's a whole economic shift. And then social impact, we've talked about that. One of the most important is that our models and our systems for caring for our world's people are broken. But new models have started to emerge. So how could we, build on those? I think, we've got to realize that sustainability and diversity and inclusion now permeates everything we do. It's not a standalone topic. It's part of every issue that we want to tackle. I think a couple things that weren't mentioned that I would just wanted to throw in, and they probably fit in broader pictures, are financial systems fit for purpose. There's a flaw in our pricing systems in capacity markets. It's often resulting in allocation of capital to short-term, unusable, and unsustainable uses. So that's something, that we need new models that integrates, sustainability in those global standards. I think one that I bring up when we're together all the time is, we're still now that we can leverage digital technology to build creative solutions to scale up initiatives. You know, we've got lots of startups. We're not short on startups. We have a scale up issue. And so how do we bring, you know, we've got a wealth of resources at our fingertips. How do we bring those supports and investments and scale them up? And then one more that I've been thinking about is reimagining infrastructure. So we've started to think about that in our cities, in our communities. There's been a huge shift in hard infrastructure. We have tons of hard building, road infrastructure. We've moved into all of this knowledge infrastructure, and there are gaps, you know, in digital infrastructure access, right? So emerging countries, even within our own regions and our own countries and our own province, there are still areas that don't have internet connections to be able to move young people's minds, to move economies and to shift economies into the new world. So, you know, my thing is an overarching, you know, global coalition, I think is brilliant. I think it's a matter of harnessing some of these with a compelling, timely, rapid response, you know, building in resilience and tackling some of these systemic issues wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Laurie. Peter, over to you. You mentioned before that you would like to share some ideas on focus areas.
I think, you know, let me begin with one of the best sets of tasks or targets that we have, and these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. I think that's a perfect framework for all of us and for actually scientists and industry alike. But if you ask me, where do I see the differences? You had really used some nice words: accelerator, highlighter, and the social elements. Now, the acceleration I see very clearly in the rise of contact-free economy. This is a consequence of COVID-19. Cashless payments, video conferencing, telemedicine is soaring, augmented and virtual reality, remote working conditions, which raises a complete different issue. For example, what does it mean for our social interaction? You know, Hitachi now decided, despite the fact that Japan has one of the lowest numbers of actually infected COVID patients, Hitachi decided to maintain at least 1/3 of the workforce in home office. So this will not go away. We will have a new normal in our working behavior. We will accelerate automation. I mean, today when I looked at the Japan Times, I just saw that Family Mart, which is a grocery, little shops, but it's all over Japan. They are starting to use robots to stock the shops. So we will see intelligent machines. We will see intelligent robotics that will be helping and assisting us. And let me make one point, which I think a lot of people are afraid of: AI. So artificial intelligence, from my point of view, will be a key technology that is not going to replace people, but it will instead empower people. There are a couple of other issues, but one thing, and discussing in the context of what Miriam has said, I really think, you know, resilience cannot mean that a rich country buys all the therapeutics that are available and leave everyone else out dry. That cannot be resilience. It's good for a single country, but it's not good for the world. Now, in terms of new venues, new companies, you know, I ask myself, why doesn't Asia, with this tremendous number of people, not have a Silicon Valley? Well, because in most cases, venture capital is too low. We have not enough IPOs. There should be definitely the intelligence. There are top universities, but yet we do not have the entrepreneurship. We do not have the dynamism, the dynamics that is available in the United States. The thing which I think we could do together with the GFCC is to provide maybe a comprehensive funds for social impact R&D. We need to study what can help our world, what can help the economy. And I'm coming to what Bill has said, for example, incentivize social impact entrepreneurship. I know the European Union, for example, they have a EU climate launchpad business idea competition. So it's a competition where you get an award if you come up with a convincing technology. And I mean, I know it for a fact because one of the OIST people were the winner of the Carbon Tech Award at the Climate Launchpad in 2019. But there are also some already startups along these lines, like in Hawaii, there is Elemental Accelerator. We have a corporation, Benefit Corporations, a new type for-profit corporation that considers societal impact. So there is a plethora of things that we can use and can enhance and can maybe support by means of global fundraising in order to drive these issues that are important, not just for the highly developed countries, but also for the developing countries.
Thank you so much, Peter, for, let's say, bringing this perspective, not just in terms of priorities, but also in terms of tools that we could use as humanity, but also as our organization, potentially to think about how to accelerate some of the things that we're talking about. And we have several questions here, and I will group those questions. But before I do that, I would like to turn back to you, Miriam. I think that this notion of social inclusiveness across the different boundaries that you mentioned, right? Race and geography, right? What are some of the hows, some of the models potentially that you see to address that we could even embed in this conversation?
The models that, sorry, maybe I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, so you highlighted some of the very critical aspects that we have in terms of the race divide, the society, the society divide, but also in terms of geography. You mentioned Africa, right?
Yeah,
What are some of the models that you see that we could potentially use to address that, to make progress, right? Building on your experience and the things that you've been doing.
What I've been trying to do is exactly that, to create a network of people who are aligned in values, principles, and who actually want to change the state of things. And from there, those alliances create strategies and aligned and put the work in place that is needed to get the changes we need to see. I am building a system. I am trying to build that system still. There are no other existing systems that I could tell you, that or that one is working and I'm getting my inspiration from all those. No, because I think that we really need to rethink all our approaches, and everything needs to be, this was a period when I thought that since we were all invited to stop, that this would be an opportunity for us to recalibrate and to shift our perceptions and understand the other side of the people who usually don't have access. Because this crisis puts us in a situation where people that thought that they were untouchable, they just realize that they are humans like the rest of us. And but now that I see that life is going on, I see that people are going back to the same old habits. And I'm sorry to go back to this same thing that I'm going to say. We need to integrate in this new normality equity and equality. And unless we are in that point, we cannot even talk about AI. Because AI, what AI is doing and the danger of AI, yes, there are many good aspects, Peter, as you said, but there are also great dangers. Because what AI is doing is killing Floyd, you know, the algorithm is biased. So how can we possibly believe and trust in existing systems that are biased, that have a very, very wrong starting point and design, because they haven't been inclusive enough. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to actually do what we are doing, to reach out to people that are aligned in values with us, whether they are institutions or individuals, and work towards the world, towards the goal we want to achieve, and in order to see the world we want to see. You know, for me, it would be impossible to start a business just for the sake of earning money. I started Mushima, and Mushima, it's a movement. It is a business because I want it to be obviously sustainable. We are a biotech company, we are a cosmetic company, we are a media company, because all this is interconnected, as I told you in the beginning. If you want to change the narrative of things, you need to start working towards alternative narratives to feed into different imaginaries, because we have been trapped. We are all trapped, and somehow we all suffer from the same thing, which is colonized mind. Even us, the Africans, the way we perceive ourselves sometimes. The majority of the people from our community are not able to dream, and dream, it's key for you to achieve anything and to be able to believe that you can change the state of things. And if you don't dream, how can you change or fight in a positive way for a change if you don't believe that that is possible? So I don't know if I answered your.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for doing that. I think that you brought this concept that we need to go outside the normal domains that we go in order to create new systems that are not just replicating the, let's say, the patterns and the standards. What do we have to?
Absolutely, and we need more so to guarantee that there are things that are for universal access: healthcare, justice, education, housing. We shouldn't have to, people shouldn't have to, you know, to struggle to pay their rent. That is not fair.
We'll be back to that. Thank you.
You know, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. So let me just pull some of the questions that came up here, and maybe turn to you, Chad, and maybe you, Bill, but starting with you, Chad, if you could maybe translate what a resilience is, maybe share some examples. And our colleague Chad Evans raised that. So in order to really to drive that, we need to inspire in some way and provide examples to people. So what could you share about resilience, Chad?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chad Evans. An example of resilience to me is in companies during a crisis period. Most have a crisis process. They have a room they go to work from. They have procedures in place. In industrial companies where I spent a lot of time, you think about it on an environmental issue or a weather issue, a hurricane or typhoon. But what we're finding is that same process of speed of action, connecting people, focus, can apply to almost any issue. So I think one aspect of resilience is using those techniques that you may have set up for something separate, but applying them to this current point in time that's needed. And I think COVID-19, I found many companies have used their crisis management process, which wasn't designed for something like this. It stretches out over months, perhaps years, but it's worked out quite well. If I could add just one more piece, Roberto, that I'm trying to make it an answer to Chad Evans' questions. I can't make it work, but I'd like to get it in if I could. And Peter's comments about Japan made me remember this. But the UN University, which is located in Tokyo, had a very unique process a couple decades ago, but I think it would apply greatly here. Is they had a problem-solving community at that point in time when I was working with them. It's about 3,000 people, and they would load a question, a problem that hadn't been solved up, and allow all 3,000 of the people in their network to respond with a potential answer or an insight. They would sort that down to the 10 most promising answers to the problem. They would go back to their network and let them rank order the 10, and they would narrow it down somewhere between 1 and 3. And then they would have the network again talk about how to make those one or two items a reality. And then what you had created in a very short period of time, weeks, was a family of solutions or a solution to a problem. Now, the unique thing, and I think about it was really sparked by Marion's comments, then the whole world owns that answer. Nobody has intellectual property on the answer. It's now available for anybody to use in any way possible. And I think that would be very, very important, because that would be a unique way of going about it. And it would deal with a small step toward more equality going forward. Something like that could even be something that the council could consider and could be an aspect of your next step in this series. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. So I think once again to this notion that maybe we could partner or build some tools like this community of learning, practice, and accelerating some answers that are needed in the globe. Bill, we got some questions here also about resilience, but also about metrics, right? This is a conversation, and our colleague Juan Pedro from Argentina reminded us that we had a similar conversation in the past about metrics. So how could we accelerate this into practice, right? Not just thinking about the GFCC, but the whole series of things that we are addressing here. How could we accelerate those things in society toward implementation?
Roberto, I'll just continue a theme of my remarks. We have the ability through these calls and through networks and through global communications to much more effectively and aggressively promote metrics in the way that we haven't before. What this has taught me, we have Okinawa, we have Lisbon, we have Canada. How marvelous is that we can communicate as well as we can? So to me the answer is simple. We look at the work we've done on Decoder. We look at the work we've done on what creates a sustainable society. There are a lot of people working in this field, but what creates a sustainable, resilient society? What are the markers? And what we haven't done is we have no effective mechanism to communicate widely an agreed upon set of metrics. We can do a much better job of that, it seems to me, in promoting sustainability and resiliency. What this group, if there isn't a group better than this to have a working group saying, what are the sustainability and resiliency metrics that we should promote? What should we concentrate on? What should we seek to communicate over a period of time? I bet you, Chad's point, I bet you in 8 weeks, we could come up with a series of resiliency and sustainability metrics, which could become a hallmark for us.
Thank you, Bill. Well, let's work on that. Thanks for that. Deborah, maybe if you would like to comment on any of the aspects that we just heard, but also Chad Evans, ask the question on the how we could engage the 100 million Americans that you mentioned, and the people who are disenfranchised and not connected to the innovation enterprise, but also your comments on what we just heard, Deborah.
Thank you. Well, this has been such a rich conversation, and we've covered so many topics. They're kind of a construct that's emerging in my mind, and maybe I should save this to our final go round, but I'll share it now. I think we've really, because of COVID and this global pandemic, and as I think Peter said, it impacted everyone equally, no matter what the status of a nation or an individual was, that we're in this era of creative destruction, but it's the time for creative co-design, creative co-development, and it is across time, space, and matter. Thank you, Miriam, for bringing Einstein into the discussion. And so this is a tremendous opportunity moving forward to really begin to address so many issues that we have talked about, we know about, but we always sort of put them on the back burner. So, in the case of the United States, on the issue of education and inclusivity in education, we have for generations now have had systemically failing schools in cities, and particularly in the cities where there is racial disparity, inequity in terms of opportunity, jobs, and things. And the schools are fundamentally failing. And we have to have major systemic reform in how schools are operated, the governance system, all of those things, because it's not an issue of money. Billions and billions of dollars have been put into these institutions, and they continue to fail. And so I'm not an expert, nor would ever pretend to be, of how the solutions would be, but that's a fundamental thing we have to do in the United States. And similarly, in other parts of the world, we have to ensure that these fundamental institutions that enable people from early age through their working life and their wisdom as elderly have the tools and capabilities to participate in the world of the future. And really the connectivity of universal broadband is absolutely huge. And Lori mentioned this, but again, in the United States, when the schools all went online, there were many children that didn't have any access to a computer, didn't have any way to participate at all in this. And we need to ensure that that is something, it's almost I think education is a human right. It's part of the SDG goals. We have to really accelerate through philanthropy and all the international organizations to ensure we have universal electrification. And we also have the ability to connect and learn digitally, because it will be a great equalizer. The other thing I want to comment on, and Lori brought up some of the issues around financing, and we have so many startups and the issues at scale. And we've been working on that for years. How do we go from startup to scale up and create the value from all the innovation? But the financing issues are huge. Trillions and trillions of dollars sit in hedge funds. They don't invest in the things we're talking about. Miriam, if we had time, I'd love to hear what you think about debt financed infrastructure, because that's the new tool for 21st century colonization of Africa, is the debt financed infrastructure, where all these assets are now, bit by bit being controlled, particularly by China. But that's not a tool for development and for inclusion at all. That's a tool, of subjugation. So these are just a few thoughts that emerge from this conversation for me, but it's really a time of creative destruction, creative co-design, creative co-development across time and space and matter. And the GFCC really needs to play a very important leadership role in how we move forward to address these tremendous opportunities for the future.
Peter, talking about tools, I think that we got a question here about what are some of the tools that we could have really to address global challenge, as you mentioned, the access to health and the access to health technologies, right? You mentioned this idea of potentially even funding some social impact or social innovation initiatives. But what are maybe some of the tools that would come to your mind in terms of addressing some of the things that we talked here, right? And I just want to leave also a question for everybody as we're approaching the end of our session here. And it's a question that we got about the missing pieces in the international system today. What are some of what's missing in institutions and what we could maybe have as an action point? But I'll leave that for the final round. Peter, any ideas, but also talking on venture capital, something that you mentioned. Oh,
this is a real issue for me in terms of looking how can we regenerate the jobs that have been lost, not the least about due to COVID, and OECD has just published today the latest numbers, and they are calculating now with 12.6% jobless people versus 5.3%, which in normal years would be the case. So where can we generate the jobs? Well, you know, I'm a great friend of startups. And the United States is a perfect model because they have shown that 75% of all new jobs have been generated by companies that are less than 5 years old. So this is a model, as I said, it almost reminds me of the post-war period, Second World War, where we had a huge boost in many countries, having investment, having entrepreneurship in order to reconstitute the economies. And this is what I think at least the startups to some extent can do in many countries. And whatever the areas are that we can debate, and my personal view is the major areas that where science and business will meet and will drive that forward remain the same, literally. I think, like, for me, the first is health and well-being. We have all the tools of genomics, we have the microbiome, we have the lifestyle data, we have the variables. It will change the perspective as to what an individual can know or wants to know, provided we have the security. Now, cybersecurity, I just in passing, this has to be a more nationalized issue. So I believe countries have a keen interest to nationalize or renationalize cybersecurity in order to protect the interest and in order to make the country safe. With respect to countries that are trying to target know-how and IP. Environment and energy. I think this is a huge field where Chet is much better qualified than I. There are technologies where I think one should take a look at. I'm not 100% sure they will work, but fusion power is, after all, still in the debate. Wireless power transmission, you know, of course, we have a lot of current and experimental access to new types of material that will facilitate and will have a photovoltaic cell at a much cheaper rate with high efficiency. I think agricultural and food, third big area where I think technologies are available that are incredible. You know, like I said, these guys from OIS, they have just used organic waste and they mix it with the gel and put it into the soil, and that keeps the water, you know, for the plants. So in dry areas, this is very cheap. On top of this, you know, according to food, you have all the remote drone measurable parameters like dryness, like salt, and you know, you can design now plants that grow in areas where you would not have believed that a plant can grow. For example, make it more salt tolerant. So for me, these are the three key areas which I think we will continue to do research on, and which would eventually, of course, be of benefit to all.
Thank you, Peter. A very short question, very quick answer. Jeff Kinder asked one thing, and I think that really goes to you. Does the pandemic experience regarding open sharing of scientific results suggests that the emphasis on bibliometrics is passé? Yes or no, or maybe just quick question. Do you have an idea on that, Peter?
I thought you wanted to hear chat. Sorry, can you repeat the
No,
question?
no, no. You yeah. If let's say if the open sharing experience of data science and scientific results coming off of the pandemic suggests that the focus on bibliometrics in science is passé, what's your quick
No.
answer to that? No. Okay.
Scientists have as a measure of say high quality. You need to have an analysis as to what the data value is, and the data value is determined by other scientists.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. I think that we're really approaching the end of our session here. I would like to go for a final round here, give you like 1 minute for your final comments and invite you to reflect on what we just heard in the conversation, but also all of you on these two notions that we need to go beyond our normal boundaries in order to engage and change reality and reframe things, but also maybe what are some of the missing parts in the global system that we could address. Who would like to go first?
I would like to start maybe, and
Okay.
and firstly I would like to answer Deborah. Thank you, Deborah, for bringing up the debts of the African countries towards not only China but many countries. As you know, the war has been profitable for many people in several countries, and the war has been created. This is the type of things that we need to demand from our countries. We cannot just accept that the countries can initiate wars and profit from the states they live in, all these countries. And we cannot allow that our countries somehow contribute to the corruption in the African countries. And we cannot allow that the Western countries manipulate and even choose many of the African leaders that are in power today. So we are, yes, we are facing a time where we are all invited to stop, reboot, and rethink the way we lead and live our lives and the decisions we make. And we need to make people accountable, and politicians need to be accountable, and our leaders need to be accountable for all their actions. This cannot just, you know, keep on going as it is. And the debt in Angola, for instance, is ridiculous, because many of the things that China has built, they don't exist anymore, because the quality of the materials is just, you know, it makes me really sad, because it's not a fair game. It's not, and I think that we all should come into these tables and conversations. All these negotiations need to become more transparent. We demand transparency and a greater inclusion of more voices and people that really are engaged in defending the rights of people. These people should be in the table of conversations, as well as the rest of the politicians that are actually in power and have the ability to change. Sorry.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you for highlighting this needs. It's not just, it's about enlarging the conversation. We need to do that. Bill, your final comments and reactions to the things that we talked here. I saw you raise your hand.
Roberto, I've been working in the doing business field for 20 years. And I've been remiss today in directly connecting our work on sustainability, on the decoder, to, and picking up Deborah's point, which is simply that capital will go where it can achieve a return, where it can be returned safely, and where transparency and the rule of law predominates. And it touches on Miriam's point. So what are we all about? We're all about, if we want to expand global startup opportunities, the capital is there. And Peter has rightly highlighted how important expanding the startup culture is globally. It's perhaps one of the 3 or 4 major needs right now. Capital is there, the will is there, the technology is there. What isn't there is the willingness of that capital to be deployed in various regions of the world because it doesn't have a safe path to profitability. So when we talk about a sustainable society, when we talk about building a resilient society, in my mind, it's indistinguishable from a society which permits capital to come in to those African countries and achieve a return and be returned to the capitalist. So the growth of entrepreneurship in the third world is a critical issue. I would love it if we could be a part of that effort.
Thank you, Bill. Laurie, your comments.
Sure, just very quickly, I think the GFCC needs to continue to be a convener, to continue to build out this platform for change, and building on the amazing comments that we heard this morning, building on global platforms for a coalition that is more than knowledge sharing. The more we keep sharing and talking, we're just admiring the problem. And so being able to focus these conversations beyond into very specific actions that we want to tackle. It's about the vision for the sustainable world, creativity, organizational ability, transformation, insight. They're willing to invest and take some risks. And it's about, to Deborah's point, that creative co-development and about new value creation. It comes through building trust. And we didn't speak enough about that today, but the partners, I heard Miriam also talk about how she's brought individuals together that have that value set, that want to make a difference, that it's not about me, it's about how we collectively can make incredible change and push us forward into moving action. And I think the GFC is uniquely positioned with its global partners, with its strong respected relationships, to be able to establish this, really it's not establishing, it's moving it forward to the next level in this collaborative innovation across these critical fronts.
Thank you, Laurie. Peter, over to you. Any final reflections?
Thank you very much. I think I'm an optimist, so I believe that the COVID crisis will leave a dent, but it will also leave an impression how to solve future crises of that sort. We will see a little change in the working habits. We will have more automation. And Bill is absolutely right. The driving factor of all of this is capital, and capital requires profit, which is good and bad at the same time. And let me give you an example, and this leads a little back to Miriam. If you look at drugs that need to be paid for, of course, big pharmaceutical companies are only interested in drugs that make money. But then if you look at what has happened and what people has discovered is that there are very cheap drugs like dexamethasone. You can buy liters for almost no money. And that substance can be used for patients that are seriously clinical ill from COVID-19. So what the point I'm trying to make is, here we have a room for expansion. We have a room for fostering the research in these areas where you can have a drug that can very cheaply provide it for developing countries. So, at the end of the day, I believe there is a lot of space for GFCC, space that I see in the interface of, making money and being socially active.
We count on you for that. Thank you so much for being with us today, Peter. Chad, over to you. Any final comments or reflections on our conversation?
Roberto, thanks very much. Two very specific suggestions. We have our principles of global competitiveness. We update them every year. We should update them this year and take into account everything we've learned from COVID-19. I think this could be a very important refresh, and we shouldn't miss the opportunity. And as we look at those refreshed principles, I would say if this organization could take one problem we could solve and actually get a solution. Yeah, so I think we've really had a very expansive conversation here. It's great. We could take into account all these perspectives and just find one problem the GFCC could solve to make the world better. That'd be a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chad. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you. Let me thank everybody for their tremendous participation, brilliant comments, and the dialogue that ensued today. It was really a wonderful culmination for the first phase of Reboot, Rebuild, and take us into the future. I just wanted to conclude with a little kind of overarching comment. And before I do that, we are going to go back and capture all the learnings across the 8 conversations. And Chad, thank you for linking that to the 2020 GFCC principles. I think we were thinking the same way along that, so that's great. I think you all know that we will be in November having our 2020 Global Innovation Summit online, this time with our colleagues in Australia, who a year ago were very prescient in choosing as the topic health, innovation, and the future economy. And of course, we will have a tremendous amount of very critical content and ideas and solutions to present in November as we go forward. So my final comment is, the time is now. We need a new global compact for inclusive transformation. And we have to harness the potential of technological transformation, but it has to be working together based on truth, trust, and transparency. So again, thank you, Roberto, for your leadership in bringing us all together and designing and managing these fabulous conversations. And I thank all of you in the GFCC community for your tremendous commitment and support as we move forward. And we will design a potential solution path for a great problem we will co-design together. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Deborah. And we're doing one final thing here. We're taking a group picture. And when I do that, I want to think my key, let's say my 3 takeaways from this conversation are really that we need to continue to exchange knowledge. We need to enlarge the conversation, not to replicate past bias, and we should take some action and solve at least for one thing. Thanks for that, Chad. So smile now, here we go. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. If you are attending this conversation, this will be continued. So we'll be announcing soon, as Deborah said, let's say the new dates and some of the themes for the continuation of the GFCC conversation series. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much.